Hello everyone, Richard Carlton here. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. And today we're going to have a special guest star with us talking about all the ins and outs of SSL security, certificates, etc., plus all the recent changes with the FileMaker platform. However, before we do that, I should introduce myself. I am the creator of FMTrain.tv, Richard Carlton. My production or broadcast engineer today is Margaret. She's broadcasting from Reno, Nevada. I am in Hayward, California. And our guest star is in, where are you at, Claus?
I'm in Denmark, Europe.
Denmark. What's the city in Denmark?
It's called Herning.
Okay. All right. Cool. So real quick, the upcoming broadcast schedule, Mark, you can pop it up on the screen for us. We're going to, well, what are we doing, Mark? I can't see your screen. Tell us what we're doing, Margaret.
I can tell you what we're doing. Okay, so today we're doing Revisit SSL on FileMaker server with the wonderful Claus. Wednesday is going to be UI UX in-depth with Nick Hunter. Nick Hunter has more tips and tricks because, of course, Nick Hunter has more tips and tricks. Thursday, FM Workmate and FileMaker, Mr. Watson will be returning to chat to us about his workmate. Friday is also going to be Christian Schmitz, who will be here to talk about monkey bread as an open Q&A, so bring your questions. Monday will be magnetic card swiping, and then Tuesday will be using JavaScript with Leland Long. So
we have a whole group of people. We're very excited to work with all these people and have Claus and Leland and Christian Schmidt and all these wonderful high energy people, Mr. Watson, to present awesome content for us here at FMTrain.tv. So as a reminder, if you want to support the channel, we highly recommend you, and to be honest with you, if you're learning the FileMaker platform and you want to be successful, I'll just be very clear about this. You need to buy our training, period, right? If you want to fail at life, get divorced, and die early of lung cancer, then don't buy our training. But if you buy our training, I guarantee you'll live to at least 90 years old and you'll be successul with FileMaker. So that's always a good deal for us, right? So you have my word. You have my word on that. But now the training is very, 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 very important. If you don't have the training, you're going to have a tough time of it. So at any rate, so I do appreciate it. So if you go to fmtrain.tv, there's a tab at the top on the left side. That's the live upcoming broadcast. Those are 6 vertical records of information that come out of a FileMaker database, live pressed on the website using the data API and PHP and things like that. And then if you press the bundles button, it's where you can support the channel by purchasing one of the bundles. If you already have FileMaker, just get the video only bundle. But if you don't have a copy of FileMaker for yourself yet, or it's expired and you need an updated one, then purchase the complete bundle, which includes a full copy of FileMaker Pro. So with that in mind, I want you to introduce Claus Lavendt. Claus has been around for a very, very long time in the FileMaker community. Claus is awesome. He's one of the sharpest people I know in the FileMaker platform. Having him here is a real honor, and we are all thrilled to have that. Now, Margaret, who do we have dialed in today? Because we broadcast on Twitch, YouTube, and Discord simultaneously.
We do.
So who do we have today?
We have on the Discord, we've got Canberra, David Angel, Ed Burkle, Foxy Jack, Gadidi, Jake Shealy, Jericho, Larry, Christian, Monkeybird Christian, Ruben, Scott.
That Christian.
On YouTube, we've got Michelle and Lynn. Hello, good to see you both. And then users in chat for Twitch, we've got Alpha Lima 92, Diskinko, Extra More, Jericho again,
Extra More.
And then Woody DKW. So, hello,
all right,
everyone.
Cool. Well, everyone's got their cool fighter pilot call signs. So, Claus, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do and where you're located, right? You tell us who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm Claus Lavendt. I've been around since, since 94. I'm running a company called Datamanics. We are located in Denmark, and we have a team in Spain as well, and a couple of other people who are working with us from Belgium, among other places. So we have been doing this for a long time. We are mainly building solutions for companies, and that range from very small companies to large international corporations with more than 100,000 employees. So it's very broad, and it's from all kinds of industries. So I've been speaking at several DEF CONs, both in the US and in Europe. I used to be a light designer. I'm also a commercial photographer. I have a degree in that. And once in a while I do that as well. So was that enough personal stuff?
Well, so your creative side, so you do creatively, you're doing photography creatively. All right. Do you play a musical instrument? Do you play an instrument?
I play piano and bass.
Okay, well, you can always tell a serious FileMaker developer because they always do something creative like that, right? The really ones that love it.
Well, that's why I think that's why most of us has stumbled upon FileMaker, because that allows us to unleash our creative sides. So yeah.
Yeah, Claus needs to promote that. We should do that. Unleash your creative side, right? So.
I mean, there's been several talks at DEF CONs where people are telling what are your backgrounds, and I mean, 8 out of 10 people has a background that is creative of some form. So yeah.
Cool. Well, what are we doing today? And as we go along, make sure you explain why should we care? Yeah.
So we are talking about the very, very boring stuff of SSL certificates and security. And that sounds a little bit boring, but it's very important. So my idea for today was to just go over the basics of how SSL is working and in connection with FileMaker server, and maybe show some stuff that people don't really realize, even if you know how to install the certificates. And then we are going to talk about best practice, and that's actually the key word for today, because FileMaker released 19.3.2. It's a little bit confusing with all those versions. And there is I call it a hidden feature that allows us to use best practice now, which wasn't actually the case until now.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
That was my idea. Okay. So should we just fire off?
Yeah. Go ahead and show your screen and show us what we're doing.
Oh yeah, I need to show my screen. Just a second. There we go. So sorry. I was actually showing a slide with my personal stuff. Okay. Anyways, so that was the agenda. You see my screen now, right?
We do indeed see your screen. So
awesome. All right. So I'm gonna talk about some of the basic stuff, and this might be very basic for some of you, but all network devices, including computers and servers, has what is called a network address. So basically, you have a computer, and I want to talk to a server. But in order for the computer and server to talk to each other, we need an address. And on the internet, there's the IP address. That is the address of the computer, and if it's IPv4, it's the format of 192.68 and so on. And now we are beginning to use the IPv6 format, and the reason for the IPv6 format is basically it allows for a lot more devices on the internet than the previous format. But basically, in order for two computers to talk to each other, they need to know the network address, and that's the IP address. However, who can remember the IP address of a service you need to speak with? And that's where the domain name was invented. So instead of having to remember an IP address, let's use something more interesting. So that would be fmtraining.tv. That's a domain name that we could remember. And in order to know which computer should I talk to, our computer is asking a DNS server. So, hey, I want to talk to fmtraining.tv. Which server should I speak with? and then the DNS server will return the IP address, and then we can communicate with the server at the other end. So this is really, really basic, but it's very important when it comes to SSL certificates, because SSL certificates only work on domain names, a fully qualified domain name, as they are called. And that's for example, fmtraining.tv. There's also domain names that are locally based, and then they would be named fmtraining.local, for example, or any other thing. But that's not a fully qualified domain name. And then you can have subdomains, so saying server one. Yeah.
Yeah, so let me ask a question. Can you clarify what fully qualified means again, if you could define that versus not fully qualified?
Yeah, so a fully qualified domain name is, for example, fmtraining.tv. That's a fully qualified domain name. Or server1.fmtraining.tv is a fully qualified domain name. If it's not a fully qualified domain name, then it's for example, a local domain name. And that's where it says fmtraining.local or server1.fmtraining.local. And these .local will look up a local IP address on your own subnet. So that means if you have the servers in your office and running on the same local network, it would have a local domain name. But SSL certificates only work with fully qualified domain names, and that's why if you read about it or read some post, we will refer to FQDN, like fully qualified domain names. So this is the basics of how all stuff on the internet works when you go to a website or when you want to connect to a FileMaker server. You need to connect to the fully qualified domain name. And I'm gonna show why that is important to talk about the fully qualified domain name a little bit later. But that's how it works. And an SSL certificate can only be on a fully qualified domain name. And then you would say, why can't I just put on a SSL certificate for an IP address? Well, you used to be able to do that, but it's not that secure, and IP addresses for servers might change. So it's a big hassle to make that work, because if your server changes IP address, then you would need to change the SSL certificate. And then devices have a local IP address, and then it gets translated via firewall or router into a public IP address range. And that's more details that I was not planning on going into about network specifics here. But the important thing to know is that we have something called a DNS service that is actually making sure that we get translated a domain name into an IP address. And the computer and the server needs an IP address in order to communicate. Right, so what is an SSL certificate? Well, with people, you could say, who are you? And I mean, he looks very scared. So who are you? And for us, in order to verify that we are who we say we are, well, Richard can claim that he is Richard Carlson, but how will he prove it? Well, usually we can say we have a passport. So the passport is issued by the government authorities, and the government authorities is usually someone we can trust, or at least we should be able to trust that. So in order for Richard to prove that he is actually Richard Carlson, he has a passport that says that he is Richard Carlson with some information that proves that he is actually who he say he is. So what about servers? Any server could claim that they are who they say they are, but how can we prove that the server really are who they say they are? Well, that's where the SSL certificate comes in. That's a passport for servers. So the certificate has basically two functions. One is that when you encrypt communication via the SSL layer, secure socket layer, is actually what it stands for. Then we have something that is encrypted, but we want to make sure that the server that we are communicating with is actually the server that we think they are. And the way to do that is by using the SSL certificate. And that's why we know that we are communicating with the server that is sitting in Richard's server room, and not communicating with some server in China or North Korea or wherever. So that's how the certificates is actually working. So
let me just jump in, and I want to make sure Margaret is looking for people to ask questions. If you have questions, folks, definitely write them out and ask them, and Margaret will repeat them. Margaret, do we have any questions yet?
Nope, I have sent text messages and be like, don't forget to ask questions, but everyone seems to be absorbing, which is good.
Okay, that's good. They're all listening. That's good. All right, cool. Keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, this is really basic, but sometimes it's nice to be reminded about the basics, even though that you already know that, or if you don't know that, then you get a new stuff here. So
I totally agree. People always forget. I forget things because you don't deal with it every day, and having someone remind you of the basics is, for some of you, this is all new, right? So don't let it. But if you've been doing this for 30 years, you should kind of already know this. And if you don't, then you forgot, and it's time to go back to school, right? Back to school.
Yeah. That's my point with just running quickly over the basics here. All right. So when it comes to SSL certificates, we have something called a certificate authority. Think of this as like the government that is issuing passports for people. But for SSL certificates, we have to rely on private companies to put our trust in. And there is a couple of handfuls of companies that have earned that trust. And of course, that is something that you could always argue and debate. We are not going to do that. But the certificate authority is the authority that will issue your SSL certificate. And that will, and they have the obligation to make sure that the server who has this SSL certificate is actually the server that it claims to be. So that's the idea with the SSL certificate. When it comes to FileMaker Server, we have two components that is using SSL certificate. We have the FileMaker Server engine. That is the engine that is running the FileMaker databases with FileMaker clients and FileMaker Go. And then we have the web server, which is publishing to WebDirect, to custom web publishing, and also to data API, and also OData, which is the new breed of ODBC via HTTP protocol. That's a completely separate topic for another day. But basically, we are using SSL certificates in two places. And it's a little bit misleading to show here that we have a single certificate that is being used by both the FileMaker server and the web server, because that's actually not true, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And then maybe this screen will be current in a later version of FileMaker Server. Who knows? Anyway, so what is the process of installing a SSL certificate? Well, first we need to create what is called a certificate signing request. And that is basically a file we are creating on the FileMaker server with instructions about what is the domain name of this server, who is actually in charge of this, what is the organization. But it has also a part of a private key, which is very important. The private key is a file that is generated on the FileMaker server and should never leave the FileMaker server. It is the key to unlock the server. If you have that key, you can impersonate that server anywhere else. So that's a very important piece of file to take really good care of. But this certificate signing request is will include parts of your server key, private key that you give to the certificate authority. You get it from the FileMaker server, and then you go to the certificate authority and say, hey, here's my certificate signing request. Based on that, the certificate authority will create your signed certificate that you need to install later on. And for most part, you need to purchase a SSL certificate. There is Let's Encrypt, but it's not natively supported by FileMaker server yet. Hopefully, it will come sooner or later. And as said, you get the signed custom certificates back from the certificate authority, and then you need to install the custom certificate on the FileMaker server. Right. So, fairly simple process. We have three elements in place in play here. We have the private key of the server, and we have the certificate signing request, and then we have the signed custom certificate. Right. And then you can verify. All right. So let's dig into it. Okay. Well, no questions yet, right?
Nope, I'm looking.
Nope.
People seem to be following along.
Yeah. So just interrupt me if there is. So I have a FileMaker server here running on a Mac, just to demo with. When you install the FileMaker server, it gets installed here, and it's similar on Linux, and it's also actually pretty similar on Windows. Within the FileMaker server folder, there is a bunch of subfolders. We are looking at the C store today. I think that should be short for certificate store. It has a couple of files already, which most of them are not that interesting. But it comes with a file called server pem. This one is actually the default certificates that comes with the server. And let's just I'm just gonna log in here, and hey, come on, yes, and then we can go here and see this is the Claris test certificate. This one is in here. We're actually gonna look into the files a little bit later in order to look at the specific parts. All right, but let's bring the admin console here, because it has been enhanced greatly over the last couple of versions, and as said, with 19.3.2, it is having a new feature. So the first thing we want to do...
Sorry.
Yes?
We got one question. How long does it take for the CA to issue the certificate?
That depends. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 10 hours. So it's very different. And then again, you can buy, just like you can buy a car, yeah, but which type of car? There's a lot of stuff to choose from. Not only the certificate vendors, but also the type of certificates. So, like, for example, if we go to apple.com, you will notice that, or no, they changed that. Huh. Strange. Okay. Usually there used to be a green lock when you have purchased a very expensive certificate, where the certificate authority will want to have a lot of papers done in order for you to be able to get that certificates. That's where they are really making sure that you know what you're doing, or that you're really who you say you are. With a domain validated, that's the DV option. The vendors have different ways of ensuring that you have full control over the domain. But for example, for our domain, datamanics.com, and the vendor we are using, they send an email to hostmaster@datamanics.com, because if you own the domain datamanics.com, it would be very rare that you would give away the access to an email address named hostmaster. So that's kind of, they are sending emails to that email box, and then you have to reply there. And that's basically the way they are ensuring that you are in full control of that domain that you are going to purchase for. So hopefully that was enough answer. And like I said, sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes 10 hours.
Yeah, no, I think that should be good. Lynn, let me know if you have any follow-up questions. And thank you, Claus. I will let you get back to what you were doing originally.
Good. All right. So without going in, well, actually, there's different types of certificates. You can buy a certificate like this server is named T99. That's the subdomain .datamanics.com. Naturally, we have our website that is just datamanics.com. And then we have different other servers that are running on subdomains. Subdomains is the name you put in front of the dot and then the domain name. So it could be www, like you did in the old days. No one is really using that anymore. Or it could be server 1, or in this case, it's T99 for this particular server. And then you can buy a certificate for every single server that you are using. But nowadays, we all get 3 licenses for server, and I think it's a very good idea to set up at least 2 servers, one for development and one for production. And then actually the third one, you could use that for staging, or you could have that as a failover or whatever. So already here with the standard license, you could use 3 servers, and then you would have to buy 3 certificates if you want to buy a certificate for each server. Or you could buy a wildcard certificate. The wildcard is where you put a star and say, okay, whatever is in front of the domain name is okay. So this certificate will be valid for whatever is in front of the .datamanics.com. So that is T99, server 1, www, whatever. So in this case, I'm using a wildcard because, we have a bunch of servers. Of course, we're doing that. And here, we also need to fill in some more information because just like with your passport, we need to identify ourselves. And that's where you put in information about this, about your company, so that, we can actually put the information in here. And I think it's true that only the domain name and the organization or company name is required. Normally, I always fill out all the other stuff as well. Like this, and then I put in a password, which is a little bit strange because it's normally not required. But FileMaker requires it when you create a certificate signing request. And then in another dialog, they say, oh, well, the password is optional. Well, we created it, of course, on the server. So, of course, it's mandatory. Right. So I click create. And what we get is a certificate request here. And this one is a base 64 encoding. And that's really what it is to it. The signing request looks like this. The signed certificate looks like this. The private key looks like this. But it has different header here, like begin certificate request. Okay, so now we know this is the certificate request. And then I would copy this one and I would go to my SSL vendor. This is a Danish one, so just don't do that too much. So it's a wildcard, it's domain validated, that's the cheapest one. I'm using normally the rapid SSL, and then I put in here the CSR. So they are actually using the same names, the certificate signing request. Okay, great. So I just paste it in here and make sure that I have the domain name here and make sure that it is the wildcard you're using. And then, of course, here they are host master. And this is just the ordering screen at my local SSL pusher. There are a number of places where you can buy stuff, and this is, since this is in Danish, it's only relevant if you're if you can speak Danish, which most of you probably don't. But anyway, this is how you order the certificate. So what happened here? Nothing, right? We still have the Claris test certificate, not for production use, and it's issued by Claris. And here's the information about Claris. It's in Santa Clara, California. Well, not anymore, but nothing changed here. We have not applied any SSL certificates. And if we are looking at the server, now we can see we actually got two other files. We got a file called serverkey.pem. This is the file to take really good care of. This is a file that should never ever leave the server. If this file leaves the server, then with this file, you can get the certificate, the signed certificate, and combine those two, and then you can put it onto any server in the world. And then you can impersonate the server here. So it's like, think of this like your fingerprint, right? This is the server's fingerprint. And like you don't want to go and cut off your fingers and give it out to strangers in order for them to use that to impersonate you. You don't want to give this fingerprint of the server to anyone, right?
Cutting off fingers. Cutting off fingers. I love it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm very visual, so.
So am I. So am I. So some of these guys, they know me. I'd cut off fingers if I thought it would help make the case, but someone would be grossed out. So yes.
Yeah. Really. Well, I think you just cut off a finger before we started, didn't you? It was red.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
Anyway.
Yeah, the grease on the grease is red here. Yeah.
Anyway, right. So the other file that got created is the server request, right? And that was actually what we just had. FileMaker was nice enough to show us a dialog where we could copy the content of this file. But the file is actually nothing more than a text file. And if you open that, you can see this is the text that I just got from the dialog. And the reason I got it from the dialog is because the certificate authorities, the vendors or the SSL dealers, they only want to have this text. They don't want to deal with the files, but it is actually a file. So normally you just get this block of text and you copy and paste it onto a website. But it goes into a file, and this file is nothing more than a text file. It is plain text. If you are playing around, make sure that you have plain text formats. Otherwise, you're screwing stuff up. And then it has to be in UTF-8 encoding, which is pretty nice on Mac and Linux because they are already speaking UTF-8. On Windows, you need to make sure that the encoding is correct if you play around on Windows with it. But this is the block of text. This is the actually a certificate. It's a base 64 encoded block, and there's nothing more to it. And if we look at the server key, well, it looks exactly the same. It's a little bit bigger, but it's basically the same. It has some values in here that is created while we were doing the signing request. And this is the encrypted private key that is in here with a lot of random stuff. And then I actually don't know more about the details of this one. But this is the key. This is the fingerprint of the server. So this is the file. This key is not linked to the server machine itself. So it's not putting in or it's well, maybe it is putting in some parameters from the hardware or stuff. I'm actually not sure about that. But anyway, you could take this key and move it to another server, and then it will work there, right? So now I've stressed it enough. Take good care of this one, right? And if we are looking at the server PEM key, that is, well, that's a certificate, and that's actually that is actually, oh no, we couldn't preview that. That is the certificate that comes with Claris. So as you can see, we have a certificate here, and we also have the encrypted private key here. That goes into a single file. And I'm gonna go back into that a little bit later, why that is important. Right, so there's nothing more to it, just a couple of text files with the right file ending, okay? So, and now, just like in the TV kitchen, I'm going to cheat a little bit because we don't want to wait between 5 minutes and 10 hours to get our signed certificate. So I'm gonna go back and let's go over the import.
Real quick
thing.
before you go forward, yes. So we do have two questions. We've got one.
Yep.
Let me see where it is. If I update my server to 19.3.2 Windows, do I have to request a new SSL certificate or just reinstall the existing one?
You can reinstall the existing one, but make sure that you have the server key. Oh, the server key.pem. Otherwise, you are not able to do that. You need to have the server key and the signed certificate. They are linked together. You cannot install the signed certificate unless you have the server key. And that has to be the server key that was created when you were doing the server signing request that you sent to your SSL dealer. But yes, you can install. And actually, one thing that Claris has done that is brilliant is the new installers that they started creating with 19.2, I think, on server. And that is actually a full installer. But when you run the full installer, it will detect that you had already an existing FileMaker server installed. And then it will just upgrade. And well, they had upgraders before in the past, but they never worked. But this one is actually working. And if you're going to upgrade your server from 18 to 19.3, you can do that with the full installer of, well, there's only full installer now, but with the installer of FileMaker Server 19.3.2, you can just install that and then it will upgrade, meaning it will also preserve your SSL certificate. It will also preserve all your other settings that you have set up for your FileMaker server. And actually this, the installer of 19.3.2 will upgrade a version as old as FileMaker Server 16. So that's a huge upgrade, but it will upgrade it, and it actually works, and it works pretty well. So instead of installing your server and reinstall the SSL certificate, I would recommend that you just upgrade it. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, I think that's pretty thorough. Let me know if that answers everything for you, Ed. Real quick, another question from David Angel. You have to paste the CSR at the beginning and ending certificate? Question mark.
Could you repeat?
Yes. Do you have to paste the CSR with the begin and ending certificate?
Yes. So like here, we need to have this one and this one. Yes. That is actually what frames what's in this text here. Well, maybe technically you could avoid doing that, but I always do that, and you're supposed to do that. So yeah, for sure. All right.
I think you can now get back to what you were doing originally. So thank you.
Yes. I will. All right. So, like I said, I've cheated a little bit. So the request file is here. I then got a file here back from the SSL vendor, which I have named, well, actually you can name it different stuff or it comes with a different name. The name is not important. The file ending is a little bit important. It is CER or it could be CRT. There's a couple of extensions that could be used. As long as it's not PK, what's 7 maybe, or PK, there's a file ending that is called PK, but which is a bundle of files. So they don't work here, but what you get back from your SSL vendor is always a signed certificate with a file ending that is CER or CRT normally. So this is the signed certificate. Now, in order to supply a chain of trust, there is a root certificate that is identifying bits and parts within this certificate that says, okay, so this one is coming from this certificate authority. And the root certificates, without going into deep complex stuff, the certificate authority has a special root certificate that they only have, and no one could ever be allowed to have that root certificate. There's a very interesting movie about some hackers being probably the United States and Israel, who were doing hacking on Iran, and they stole a couple of root certificates, which is, well, you need to be CIA in order to do that. They are really protected and you need to be on site in order to get that. But they are using those root certificates in order to generate your certificate. But then there's something called the chain of trust, and you're not buying your certificate from the certificate authority. You're buying it from a dealer or from basically a dealer, and that dealer is dealing with an intermediate. So the intermediate is what sits between you and the root, the certificate authority. And in order to make sure that we have the chain of trust, that we actually go through a verified and authenticated real intermediate, the intermediate has something called an intermediate certificate, which proves that the intermediate is actually who they say they are. So that's the other part that you get from your certificate vendor. You get your signed certificate, and then you get let's get rid of that one because that's just confusing. So the intermediate certificate and the signed certificate, that's the two files that you get back from your vendor. Actually, there could be more than one intermediate certificate. If you have more than one intermediate certificate, you need to open these one with a text editor and then go and put them together and create a new file. So if you have multiply of these, then you need to copy the block into a single file with these intermediates. So you only have one single file. And that's basically because normally there's only a single intermediate, and FileMaker Server can only handle one intermediate. So if there's more, then you need to paste them together, unless your vendor actually provides a concatenated intermediate certificate, right? So that's the bits and pieces. This one should never be here, like I said, but this is the TV kitchen. So I've cheated. Actually, we can throw this away. And then we have the server request here, which was what we sent to the dealer, right? So now we need to import the custom certificate. And here we need to select our signed certificate. So this was my signed certificate. I'm selecting this one. And notice here, and this is the new thing, right? It says private key file. So what did I say about the private key file? The private key file was this one, the server key.pem. This was the fingerprint. This was the finger we should never cut off the server and take anywhere else. So why should I have it on my local machine? That would require me to cut off the fingerprint of the server and copy it to my machine. And as soon as I copy it away from the machine, from the server, it is in risk of being stolen somewhere along the lines, right? So, but you can, of course, if you have that file, you can pick it here. But the new thing is that you only need to pick the intermediate certificate and the signed certificate, as it should be, because the private key should never leave the server. It should be there already. And now we are actually able, when I input the passwords, I am able to import the certificate without having to pick out the private key. All right. So let's go back to the server here and see what happens. Well, what happened here is that the server key was there already, but now we got something called server custom. And the server custom, when we open this file and say, okay, how does that look? Well, it looks like this. We have begin certificate, and we have begin certificate, and then at the end we have begin encrypted private key. So the order of this is the signed certificates. That's your certificate. Here's the intermediate certificate, and then we have the encrypted private key at the end. So this single file includes all pieces that is needed for the SSL certificate to work, right? So now we have a SSL certificate that is working for FileMaker Server. So that's the database engine. The only thing we need to do now is, just like the dialog said before, you need to restart the FileMaker Server, which it looks like we don't need to. Oh, interesting. A lot of stuff is going on all the time, so I was curious to know, just to make sure that we need to open this one, and let's see. No, it's not encrypted. Just say connect, and we have the file here, and it's not connected, so it's really not working, even though. So this is a little bit confusing, because we could see here that it actually had my certificate here. It had some information here as well. So we would expect it to work. However, it doesn't work. So we need to close the files, and we need to stop the database server there, and then we can just go back here, right? So that was one of the things, like I said in the slides, this is for the FileMaker Server engine. This is the SSL for that, but we also need the SSL certificate for the web server. And on Mac and Linux, by the way, you will find they will use the Apache web server. On Windows, it will be IIS. But what happened when we did the import certificate was actually that FileMaker Server created, it actually copied the server key and renamed it to something different here for some reason that I don't know. But as you can see, this is the begin encrypted private key. This is the same key as we found in the C store. And then we have something called server PIM. And what we have here is the certificate and the intermediate certificate. So this file only has the certificates, and then it has the private key here. So FileMaker Server is actually copying and creating these two files when we do the import. So not only creating a SSL certificate for the database engine, but also for the web server.
All right, let me ask a question. Right, so you install it for the basic, what we call port 5003 traffic. It's all the Pro Go traffic, right? And so, but then as you install it, it puts it into a place where it can be used, I guess, for the data API. Is that what we're talking about, I guess?
That's for the data API, the web directs, the admin console, the OData.
All that stuff. So basically, you do it once and it copies it into a second location.
Exactly. Which is actually completely not needed, but that's actually another story. I don't want to go into details because the web server could easily just use this single file with all the components, but it's not. So
well, this is one of those things, right? So we talk about plugins on the FileMaker server, right? And when you put kind of the same idea, when you install a plugin, I think you install it actually 3 different times in 3 different locations, and it doesn't help you at all with that, right? So
no, yeah, for sure, yeah. So that's how they chose to structure it, but it could actually just use this one. The reason I'm showing that it actually gets copied down here is that sometimes when the server is not acting properly, then it could be because these files are messed up, and then the web server won't start, or it's not working as it should be. And then, you can reinstall the server, which is actually something I did just earlier today, or you can mess around with these files and make them work. And like I said, right now I just showed you, it's just basic files.
They're identical copies of both the other files. Is that do I have that straight? With just different names on it, correct?
They are. The content is identical.
Yes.
But here we have the server key and the certificates into 2 files, where in the C store folder we have everything in a single file called server custom.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, and of course we have the server key here because that's still important to have that. That was how we could put them together, and that's how the SSL is working, right? Anyway, we got it here. But the great thing here, and that's the new thing about the 19.3.2, is that we can apply best practice. And best practice is that the server key never leaves the server. That is best practice. All right, so we can start the server up again, and we can go in and just open this file. We can verify that, yes, we have this one, and I actually need to buy a new one in a couple of days, I can see. And we can go into FileMaker. We can open the file here. It's not open yet. Oh, hey, didn't I open it? Now it is. Right, and recent. And as you can see now, here we have the green padlock. We can verify that this is actually the certificate. It is installed, and this is the intermediate. So as you can see, this is the root certificate, which is signed, which is from DigiCert Global Root. The root certificate, the root certificate that tells us who is the certificate authority, is actually installed on the machine by the operating system, and that's also a new thing in I think in 19.3.2 or maybe in 19.4, is that now FileMaker is using all the routes that is installed by the operating system. Well, that's a
Yeah,
longer discussion.
that's a 19.3 change. That's a 19.3 change. Yeah.
Okay, that was 19.3. All right.
The reason we were aggravated about it because no one frankly told us about it, and then Wim de Court from Soliant brought it up, and Claire's was like, "Oh yeah, we forgot to tell you we did this." So it's once again, I think Claire's fired their documentation people, and so there's no one down there writing documentation. Would be my guess.
Okay.
That or they're sleeping at the job, whatever. But yeah, no, it's yeah, a lot of that's kind of the fun that we have these days is figuring out all the little secret things they've done to the product they haven't told us. So yes.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a good change because it used to
It's
be
not
that.
a bad change. It's just that no one knew about it.
Yeah. True. Yeah, and basically it was FileMaker Go that was the main reason why FileMaker was using their own, including their own root certificate, and that's why the supported certificates for FileMaker was a limited number of certificates. But now they made it work with the certificate that gets installed with the operating system, including on the iOS, and that's where now we have the ability to use all kinds of certificates if the root is just on the computer or the iOS device. But that's the root, and then we have the intermediate. That was the intermediate that was that my SSL pusher is buying the certificates on behalf of me through, and then we have the domain name here, which means that this is the signed certificate. And then, of course, there's all kinds of different information in here. The valid, when does it expire? That's very interesting, of course, for us to know. But then there's all kinds of encryption information in here that is, jumbo jumbo. You can look into it if you're a really geeky and want to know all the bits and pieces of this. But basically, this is the information that is needed. And one thing, if you look at this, it was not valid before. That's the start date, and that was in 2020, and it's already expiring 1 year later in 2021. And then you would say, oh, couldn't I just buy for 4 years or 5 years or just 2 years? You used to be able to buy a certificate that lasted for 2 years. But the certificate authorities got together and they decided that it would be more secure if everyone has to buy a new certificate every year instead of every 2 years. And then, of course, everyone could speculate on whether it was for security or if it was for revenue reasons that they came up with that idea. Anyway, you have to buy a new one every year.
Wow, I did not know that they had cut that back. So you can't buy a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year anymore at all?
No, not at all. Only 1 year.
Wow. Okay.
So so that's the thing. And talking about Let's Encrypt, which is it's kind of another topic, but it's also related. A Let's Encrypt certificate is normally only valid for 90 days. That's only 3 months. But the Let's Encrypt certificates are free, so you don't have to pay that. And the process of installing the Let's Encrypt certificate is automatic, which means that you just set it up and then the server will automatically renew that certificate when it's time to do that. And that's a nice option. That would be great to get that on FileMaker server. And I've advocated for it a lot. Hopefully it will come. I've seen that other people are also talking about that it would be a very nice option, but yeah, you never know. All right.
Oh,
so
right.
We do have some questions, so.
Basically, yeah, great, because I'm actually done now.
Okay, cool. How do you receive the .cer file? By email?
Typically, you get an email, and then they could be attached to the email. Or recently, with my vendor, I get an email with a link, a download link, where I click, and then I just download the files there. So that's typically the way it is. A lot of people is using GoDaddy. Personally, I've never used it, but I think they are reasonable with pricing, and then they are fairly simple to use as well. So that's a very popular vendor
Okay.
or SSL pusher.
And then we've got another one from Jeremy. What about when your SSL provider gives you a PEM chain file instead of a CER file? Will FileMaker accept this as a certificate import response from your provider?
It will, as long as you as long as it's the right format, as long as it has the right format, right? So that's where I said, as long as it has this format, and you can also have the concatenated. Actually, the signed certificate, I've seen that the signed certificate from the SSL vendor can be named PEM or CRT or CER, and it could be both the signed certificate and the intermediate certificate. So actually a concatenated file you could get from the vendor. But that's perfectly okay. As long as it has all the bits and pieces, and normally it has. Then you would only say import the signed certificate, and you would not do the private key because that sits on the server. Okay, I know I repeat myself here. And then the intermediate certificate, you don't need to pick that one. And I'm pretty sure it's optional as well. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Okay, and then another quick question from Lynn. Do you have to go through the entire process again when you renew the certificate?
Yes.
There you go.
Oregon Dean did point out that you can still buy the longer certificates, but you have to refresh them every year. According to him, it's the same process as requesting a new certificate, and all that part is just minus the credit card transaction. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess it's probably some vendors are offering you to pay upfront for certificates for more than 1 year, and then the certificate cannot be valid for more than a year. So
okay,
that's
so
why
Ruben has a really good question here. He says, I did all this stuff, and I keep getting the orange lock instead of the green lock. There was a time when I got the green lock, but I'm not getting it now. And I guess he's saying, why am I not getting the green? How come I'm getting orange?
All right. So that's where we go in here and say, it means that the connection is encrypted, but the SSL certificate for the host cannot be verified. All right. So there can be a couple of reasons for that. So if I'm looking in here, and let me see, could I hide oh yeah, great. So local here. So what I talked about in the start with the basic stuff was that we have something called local, right? So this one is named, this is just the name of the machine. But as you can see here, the domain name is lcs11.local. This is not a fully qualified domain name. If I view the certificate, I can see this also has a dataminix.com, a wildcard.dataminix.com, and it does expire at 15th of November 2021 in a couple of days. But it says it should be named dataminix.com, but it is named .local instead. So if you connect to your server and the server is local to you, then you would connect no matter what it will be. You will be connecting to it with a local domain name here, and that doesn't work. So you need to create a new favorite with the name, with the fully qualified domain name. If I can spell right? So you have to do that. You can also use an IP address, but then you will have the orange lock as well. So that is one reason that you have orange lock. Orange lock. That is if you connect it to your server locally, right? And it's a little bit frustrating because you get all this nice list of server, and you say, oh, I can just pick the local one. Yeah, but then the SSL certificate will not render valid. You need to create the favorite. And if you're a developer, no problem. But try to explain this to a customer or an office person that is just using the solution. So that is one reason. The other reason that you might get an orange lock is if you didn't include the intermediate certificate. And then there will be a hole in the chain of trust. So as you can see here, we need to have a chain of trust here. If we just go from DigiCert, global root CA to my signed certificate, the intermediate is missing. And then there is a break in the chain of trust because DigiCert cannot issue directly the certificate. It has to go through an intermediate. So that is the other reason. So if you have the orange one, try to reinstall the certificate or make sure that you are connecting via the fully qualified domain name. And by the way, you can just click the delete files when you want to do the process again. And then FileMaker Server will put them in here, the server custom and the server key, the private key, so you can create a new server key and a new server request to go over the process again.
But see, the Organdine says you don't need a $100 per year certificate to run SSL. A FileMaker client, Go client, or a DAPI user will never know the difference between a $5 certificate and a $100 certificate if the certificate is from a trusted vendor. Only a WebDirect client can see the difference of the cert. You have, if they dig enough, customer-facing e-commerce and banking is where the more expensive certificates might matter, right? So.
For sure, and that's why I just buy these main validated. Huh. What was that? Strange. I didn't turn it on. Okay, web direct.
Okay.
So yeah. And that's where, in the old days, the browsers were showing something in green here if you bought a very expensive one. But I mean, again, yes, I don't think there's many people that are actually questioning whether this is good enough or not, or if they don't see an expensive domain or a expensive certificate, they don't want to go into and use the website, right?
Yeah, cool. It's really good. The last comment I've got right here is Labo404 is kind of promoting this Soliant article about Bonjour and FileMaker. I haven't read it, don't know anything about it, so I'll need to review that before I can say anything one way or another about it. So yeah.
I think I had a comment there, and that's a pretty old article, unless they had something new. But it's actually the technology that is called Bonjour that makes this one work. So if Bonjour is not installed, which it is by default on Mac, but you can opt to install it on Windows as well. And if it's not installed, then you would not see the local stuff here. It's actually a pretty cool technology. Old people will remember the days where installing installing a printer on a Windows machine could take a day or two in order to make it work, because you need to install drivers on floppy disk and so on, and it was a huge process. And basically, Bonjour is a technology that say, okay, I can recognize the devices on the network, and the devices have this Bonjour technology, and basically the printer and the computer say, okay, So the guy in front of the computer wants to print on you. Okay, let's make it work for him so he doesn't have to think about it. So that's basically the Bonjour. And Bonjour is brilliant, but not when it comes to using it with FileMaker Server and having the SSL certificate. And that's why I said you need to create a favorite instead, where you can use the fully qualified domain name. And that's why I talked about the fully qualified domain name in the start of the video or the stream.
Well, this is good material. I want to ask everyone if there's other topics. Claus, if you have other topics you want to come back and visit us more often than once a year, we would love to have you. So anything else? I mean, are you still working on the undiscovered admin tool or the missing admin tool?
Yeah, well, I'm I'm a little bit embarrassed about that. The thing is that Claris has actually been working their off, if I could use those words, and okay. they actually stuff that I put into my tool, they have already put into the FileMaker server before I managed to publish my tool, which is something that we are not used to. Usually when we have a good idea, it takes a year or 2 or 3 before Claris incorporated it. But they have been moving very fast. Well, I also showed the ideas and tools, and I'm not saying that they did it just because I said it, but or they got inspired. But the fact is that the admin API has been expanded rapidly over the last couple of versions. And as you can see, the log one, we did that last year, I think a year ago, where we talked about my tool. And I had a feature with a very rough way of looking at the log files live, right? And now they put it in here, right?
Yep. So that's an improvement. Yep.
They improved before I managed to release my tool. So, well, it will come, but in June I was also hospitalized, so I lost a couple of weeks before I catched up, and I'm still trying to catch up. So.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome back anytime. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone here. Leland Long is here. About time you showed up, Leland, Turkey. We almost talk about you almost every day, and you're never here. Oregon Dean, Ruben, Scott, Tommy Delta 18, Larry, the Marines are here. Jake Sheely is here. Gadidi, Foxy Jack, Janice Chow, and David Angel, one of our problematic children. And CJ Berlin, welcome everyone, as well as our Twitch and YouTube people.
I think we're good. Okay.
All right, now you're there. Now she's back.
No, my audio cut out for like 5 seconds. I don't know why. I was like, oh crap, right at the end too. Thank you very much, everyone. So I'm going to run the music.
Thank you, Klaus. Klaus.
And I just want to thank everyone who was watching, and thank you for having me, Richard. It's always a pleasure.
Well, I'll come back anytime. Please come back. Okay?
All right.
Just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Trying to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.